We thanked her, and as we drove home, Chris agreed with Cheryl and said that she was already done just that God had shown her the same thing. I told Chris I believed her, and I believed Cheryl was correct, especially since I knew God sent us to her. I just had no idea how to detach myself from AJ in the situation. The love I had for AJ was so strong, I just could not imagine detaching myself from her. I had to get myself alone with God and pray, and the awesome God we serve gave me supernatural peace and the understanding just to let Him be God and take care of the situation. He so gracefully did that for me, as I had no idea how to do it on my own. Well, guess what? The very next day after I released AJ, things started happening. Absolutely amazing things. God things. A couple of months earlier, I had pulled into the 24-hour fitness lot and was facing a large, empty retail building. I clearly felt God tell me that building could be used for an indoor entertainment center with rooms that would be used for ministry, prayer, parties, etc. It would have an indoor miniature golf course with scriptures along the way and other details. This actually happened when God later moved us to Tennessee. This was very interesting to me since we had previously built 2 family indoor entertainment centers. It was at this time that we were touched by God, saved by His grace, and we knew the hard work and sacrifice that was involved in forming this type of business. I had no real interest in doing that again, but I still told Chris about it and we agreed we should pray. She felt like we were supposed to pray and actually see the numbers 777 on something in the mail that day to know to go further with this. I personally thought that was a little unusual, but that day a flyer came in the mail and on the front center in a box was the numbers 777. So in obedience to what clearly seemed to be God's leading, I contacted the realtor and asked to take a look at the property. We went the next day. The building was empty, except the only thing left in it. On a big blank wall was a large occupancy sign which read, "Maximum number of occupants 777 or 777. Well, within a couple of weeks, the building was rented to a flower shop and I was relieved, but sure the heck did not understand what this was all about. Anyway, back to the present time in this God story. The very next day after I gave the situation all to God, prayed, detached myself from it, and let Him know I'm going to trust Him throughout this ordeal, things began to happen. Chris came out of prayer in the late morning, seemed excited. She went out to get 2 items from the store and get a pizza from Amici's Pizza. When she came back home, she was ecstatically excited. She told me before she left she had prayed and asked God if we were going to get AJ back and adopt her. She told me she had prayed for God to show her 777 again and if we were going to get her back. So she began to tell me with excitement in her voice, "Mike, as I pulled onto the street, a car pulled in front of me and the license plate had 777 on it." I said, "That's cool," but thinking to myself, that could be just a coincidence. But then Chris said with huge excitement that she went to the store to buy 2 items she needed and decided to buy one more thing at the register. The cashier went to ring up her items at the register, and the register blinked and then froze. The display read, "Terminal secure." The clerk called the manager. The manager and her both said they had never seen this happen before. Just then, the register stopped blinking, the words disappeared, and the price was $7.77. She then showed me the receipt. Now I'm thinking, wow, that's really cool. But then she was even more excited, and she pulled out the receipt from Amici's Pizza she had just came from, and it was also $7.77. Now that was more than cool. I was pumped up, and Chris was ecstatic. We both agreed not to tell anyone, but to trust God and to see what God was doing. We just did not want any other person's human wisdom, opinions, or anything to get in the way with what God was doing. The next day was Wednesday, the particular day I went down to the LA Food Bank every week. Ed and Lynn Brentlinger graciously allowed me to drive their truck and trailer to load all the groceries for the food bank. I had been doing this every week for 3 years at our church. My friends, either Rick Valenzuela or Satoli, had been going with me for a couple of years. But early that morning in prayer, before I left, I was praising and thanking God for what He showed Chris the day before with the 777. I asked God if He could tell me if AJ was doing okay and what was going on. He gave me a scripture in the book of Judges about Gideon and his small army that defeated the massive enemy. They did not defeat them. God did. And God told me we were Gideon's army and fighting against a huge DCFS organization. I was feeling amazingly great that morning since God spoke to me. This does not happen often. As I entered the church office, the door into the sanctuary was closed, which is unusual, and it sounded like there was a bunch of people in there praying like crazy. It was very loud. The church was open every morning for those who wanted to come by early and pray. Normally 2 to 6 or so people might be in there. This day, however, seemed a lot different. Jan, the secretary, came out from her office, realizing how loud the noise was from the sanctuary. She looked at me with a question on her face and said, "That sounds like a Gideon's army in there." I was amazed that she said that, but agreed and asked how many people were in there. Right then, Rick opened the door with a huge smile on his face, looked at me and said that he, Kurt, and Madeline were in there praying for AJ. Jen and I both asked if that was all, just the 3 of them in there. Rick said, without missing a beat, because he was so excited. Yes. And then he asked me, Mike, does this mean anything to you? I was just praying like crazy with my eyes closed, and I saw 3 sevens come down from heaven. I am sure my jaw hit the ground as I was amazed at what he just said. And I said, yes, that means a lot. He grabbed his Bible and said, great. God told me to go to the 7th book of the Bible, the 7th chapter and the 7th verse. As he was telling me this, he was looking it up in the Bible. When he read the verse, I could not believe it. It was incredible. I told him it was the very scripture that God gave me a short time earlier that morning about Gideon's army. I called Chris and told her, and she was amazed and excited as well. Next, Rick and I drove down to the LA Food Bank and were very excited. When we had arrived, there was an uncharacteristic delay. We were held up for about 45 minutes, which had never happened before and never happened since then. Because of that delay, we did not have time to stop at the pizza buffet we usually did every week. So we decided to buy some lunch to go next door at Carl's Jr. during lunchtime. It was packed. As I walked in the door, a very tall, very homeless-looking man looked at me and said, "Hey, boss, how are you doing?" I said, "Great," but was shocked because I called other people boss. I ordered my food to go and was standing there waiting for Rick to receive his order when the homeless man started asking questions about the end times. I turned to talk to him about that there was nothing to worry about if he knew God and obeyed his word. And then I started witnessing to him about God. I told him that I'm sure he has heard people tell him about God before, but the greatest thing to do is for him to ask God to reveal himself to this man. I told him that God is faithful and he will reveal himself to anyone that's sincere and wants to know the truth. Rick and I asked to pray for him. He said yes, so we did. When we turned to walk away, this busy rush hour crowd had all stopped what they were doing to listen to us witness to him and to pray for this man. Only God could have done that. And he had the words coming through us because they spoke truth and were really good. Rick and I knew we were running behind and not really understanding what had just happened. We hurried toward the door, and just before I got there, the homeless man yelled to me, "Hey, boss!" I turned around and saw that his countenance looked different than just a few moments before. He seemed more serious and peaceful. He then asked me, "How is your little girl?" I was caught way off guard. I stuttered and said, "I think she is okay." He looked at me with a big, huge, sincere smile and said, "Nope, she's doing great." When Rick and I got outside the parking lot, Rick started jumping up and down saying, "That was an angel. That's an angel." I said, "That's either an angel or God speaking through a homeless man, just like he spoke through a donkey." We jogged to the truck and without even looking back because we were in a hurry and in awe of God and what had just happened. Once Mike Medicis, my attorney friend, was correct. DCFS had been delaying and building a case against us the whole time. One night, a school night, very late, after 11:30 p.m., a DCFS worker came to our door and demanded for us to wake up our children so he could speak with them. Even though upset that they would do such a thing, I kept calm and did as he asked. He spoke with them individually and left after midnight. Our foster care agency supervisor, Troy, and director, Pat, were extremely supportive of us. Pat even went with me to the DCFS meeting with one of their top directors. In short, he was cold, calculating, and said that in no way we would ever see AJ again, and said he would do his best, sarcastically, to try to allow us to keep our foster care license. I was very upset when we left the office. I think Pat, she was very upset as well. I got into my car and drove an hour and a half to the San Fernando Valley, the city of Woodland Hills, to see the only attorney that we could find that would possibly take the case. My mom actually found him as she could not find any attorneys in the Antelope Valley that would fight this DCFS. When I arrived to the office of James McNamara, I sat down with him and through tears and anger I explained to him what had happened. He asked questions, but was especially concerned about the time that had elapsed since AJ had been at our home. He echoed the same sentiments of Mike Medicis, grabbed a pencil, held on to the tip of the lead, and then told me that this was the chance we had of getting her back. He said he just wanted to be upfront and explained why no attorneys would take this type of case, as it's almost impossible to win against DCFS. Again, this was so foreign to me, to live in a land of the free and yet be so helpless to a government agency. Mr. McNamara said it would take $5,000 retainer just to begin the case, so I said no problem. We borrowed the money and the battle began. Chris and I did everything we were asked to do for the case. We had to get letters from friends, all kinds of pictures, character references, list our experience with children, doctor visit details, therapy visit details, heart doctor visits, charts and notes from Koinonia foster care, and more. And we were told not to talk to DCFS at all. During this process one day, Chris and I went to Baja Fresh for lunch, the same location that we had so much fun with the last lunch we ever had with AJ before she was taken. This is the first time we had been back there since she was taken. As we were eating our lunch, one of the social workers that had investigated our home regarding the original accusation with Matthew came in to have lunch. After she sat down, I walked over to her with sincerity and asked her if she was able to tell me anything about what was going on. It was like a spy movie. She ducked her head down a little bit. She looked around both ways and quietly said, "Mike, be careful. They are watching you. They're trying to cover their tracks." That is all she wanted to say. I told her thanks and left her alone, while wondering to myself, what the heck is going on? They're watching me?